As I've mentioned to you before, the works of Paul are the oldest parts of the New Testament, at least 20 years older than the first of the Gospels, which is Mark, which doesn't come around until the year 70. So this 1 Corinthians passage is someplace in the 50s. But even there, you see, it's almost 20 years after the events of Jesus' death and resurrection. So the Christian community is beginning to grow, and they're beginning to find out, how are we to be together? What are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to act? What's the point of being close to Jesus? And it becomes a bigger deal, as I mentioned, I think, last week, with the writing of the Gospels, because you're starting to have the people who were there are no longer there. People have died, and so forth. So they're trying to find ways to be together. And I think one of the things we find out pretty quickly, especially from the New Testament references, is that the absolute center of their life together, the fancy word is Eucharist, communion, Holy Communion. It was the absolute must-have part of building the community, holding the community together, helping them to have fellowship with each other. You know that Gaither song, don't you? The one that says, they pushed back from the table to listen to his word, the secret plan he had before he had to go. He said, it's not complicated. It's loving God and loving your neighbor is what it amounts to. And that was the center of their time of worship. Most of the ancient churches that are still around, the places of worship that you can still see where the early folks met, especially in places like Rome, you can tell that this is the kind of thing that went on. In the Acts of the Apostles, you hear about them gathering together periodically. Paul talks about it, always getting together and so forth. When you go to some of the ancient churches in Rome, I may have mentioned this to you before, the difficulty with Rome is that it's sinking. It's on a floodplain, it's on a swamp is what it amounts to. And so all the buildings are slowly, a little bit at a time, sinking down into the ground. So when you go into some of those churches, in order to walk in the front door, you don't have to go up steps. You have to come down some steps to walk in the front door that was built a few hundred years ago. It's sunk that much. One of those is the Church of St. Clement, and I mention it because it's really one of the ones that's pretty neat. The new church, which is only, 400 or 500 years old, is the one you walk down into. And you walk around, and of course it's got all the neat stuff that you expect to see in an ancient church. But then you'll notice that there's a way downstairs, because the current church was built on the foundation of the church before it. And parts of the church before it you can still see. You can walk around in it. The older church, which is only, 1,500 years old, it's a little older than the new church. But there's still another level. You go down one more level, and it's the level where St. Clement and the followers of Jesus in the early days in Rome met together. It's an amazing thing to be there. The whole room is not any larger than this space right here. And it's got it's got a stone floor, but you can still see the dirt and so forth. To get to it, when you leave the church above it, you walk down a little thing that looks like an alley, and that's exactly what it is, because the alley has been preserved. And there are a couple of other sites, a couple of other buildings along there before you walk into the door to the gathering place for those early Christians. It's quite possible, given who the man was, St. Clement, and given what we know about him and what we know about the timing of the church, it's possible that Peter and or Paul worshiped in that space. In that space. And I'll tell you, that's an amazing experience to have, especially when you think about, why did they get together? They got together and they always had a time of Eucharist, a time of communion. And so one of the things the church teaches us over all the centuries is that whenever you gather at the table, it's not just us. It's not just all the United Methodists. It's all the members of all the churches in all of the world now and clear in the past. I don't know, most of us aren't mystical in our religion and so forth. Some of us are, and we're more aware of these kinds of things. But one of the things the churches teach us is that when that happens, when you're receiving communion, that all of those persons for 2,000 years are here present with us. It's not just something we do to remember something. It's something we do to participate in the ongoing communion of the church. You know the thing we always talk about, the clouds of witnesses? You ever heard that stuff about there are clouds of witnesses and the angels and so forth? Think of it this way. When we come together for communion, there they are. One of the other ancient writers of the church said one of the disappointing things about us in our own day, and he said this in the 1400s, one of the disappointing things of us in our day is that the saints long for us to be with them, and we're indifferent to it. The saints long for us to be with them, but we're indifferent to it. We have all kinds of ways that we can kind of personalize, try to understand some of the meaning to that. I don't know if it's important to you, but one of the difficulties when you get to be a little older like some of us are, you don't have the children and family around as much as you used to at Easter and Thanksgiving and Christmas, right? One of the things that I miss because we've run out of little ones, boy, are you in for it. We've run out of the little ones and so forth. And at Christmas, that's hard. But one of the things we do try to do, we try to get as many parts of the family together for a meal. I remember when my wife was alive, this was her favorite thing. She loved to do a meal for everybody. And not just family, for anybody who come around. It's one of the reasons we bought the house we bought in 98. It's a huge house. What do two people need with a 9-room Victorian house? Well, one of the things was she wanted a dining room with a table big enough to get all 16 members of the family there to sit down together and eat. Well, it took us a year to find the house, and it took me another year to learn how to pay for a table that big, but we did it. And she used to, every year, she would put on one of her big deals was she would put on a Christmas open house. And she'd cook for a month. Made, remember how you used to make candy? She'd make fudge and Buckeyes and peanut brittle and the whole thing. The only thing she'd let me do is make the little weenies, with the grape jelly and the sort of thing. She didn't trust me with the rest of it. She loved to do that, loved to have people in the house. There was one year when I was living in London, I missed this. There was a new family came to meeting for worship to church at the Downtown Friends meeting where my wife and daughter were attending, were members, and they were brand new. They didn't know anybody in town. It's a man and his wife and their 2 daughters. Well, my wife, being the kind of person she was, just couldn't stand that. So she says, "Why don't you come to our house for lunch?" And knowing Linda, she had plenty. She made the greatest thing in the world if you like your house to smell like food. Take a chuck roast, cook it for about 3 hours in Lipton onion soup. And then the last hour, turn it up to about 350 and put some brown rice in it. I'll tell you what, that smells good. Well, she invites these people over, and they were just tickled to death. Here's somebody inviting them there, and they walk in the house. That's when she found out they were vegetarians. She had plenty of salad and vegetables and potatoes and bread and so forth, so it worked out fine. Those people still remember that. When I was in hospital last year, they would stop and see me down at Christ Hospital. This was a big deal to them to be invited to somebody's table. It's something we probably don't do as much as we should. We don't do as much of that as we should. Oh, we'll do it, when we're having a community dinner and so forth. But to just ask somebody that you don't really know to come to your house and eat and break bread. You have to forgive me if I tell you again my favorite story from the old TV show, The Wonder Years. You remember that show? There's one of the episodes, the daughter has gone on to college. And she invites mom and dad and her 2 younger brothers to come and have Thanksgiving dinner at her house. She's managed to get into a house with a roommate. They walk in the door and they meet their roommate. They had never met him before. And Dad was excited. He didn't really like this when he figured out that she was living with some guy. And so before the meal, he walked out. He got up from the table and walked out. He broke family table fellowship by walking out. I forget who it was. I don't know if it was the daughter or the wife or somebody went outside and convinced him he needed to come back in because it's family at the table. Even if he didn't like it, it was family at the table. That's hard for us to remember. We're not all carnivores. Some of us maybe even be vegetarians. It might even be a vegan. I mean, I've met some of those too. In our spirituality, we're the same way. We're not all alike. We don't always agree on things. If we went there on some things, there are probably some things that some of you and I would not get along. There are others that we would. We have this because I'm living at Cape May, that sometimes when you sit at dinner table, sometimes you just bite your tongue. Just don't say anything, because somebody's going to have an opinion or an idea, or somebody's going to go to some church that you don't approve of, or something like that. You know, there's always something if you open your mouth. The best thing to do is go ahead and pass the bread and smile and be nice, you know, at the table, because you're at the table with people. It's an important thing. And it's not just in the Western cultures. Eastern cultures, all cultures I've ever had any experience with, have the same kind of thing about gathering at the table. As a matter of fact, sometimes in countries where you don't go to unless you have to, you know, that people are pretty poor and things are really much different than they are here. And even those places that aren't quite that poor but still don't have what we have. I spent some time in Kenya, and those folks don't have anything compared to what we have. But they always invited you to a meal. Sometimes you had to be careful because you weren't sure what it was, but you ate it. Why would you eat it anyway? Because it was a gift of table fellowship from some other people. We stopped at one place one night. It was very late. It was late at night for me anyway. We'd been out all day, 8 or 9 o'clock. When we got back, it was dark. And there were about 15 people who had waited all day for us to get there. And some of them had traveled some distance. And what did they want to do? They wanted to sit down and eat. Sit down and eat. Trying to think of those things as we talk about our time of Holy Communion. That it really is a holy time for us, not only to remember the death of Jesus and the sacrifice that he made for us, but also to participate in the ongoing community of Jesus. To be with those who have gone before us. To be with those that, even if we don't understand them, don't speak the same language, maybe don't agree with them, they're part of who we are. And that's what communion's about. It's a time for us to lay down whatever sorts of stuff is getting between us, even in our small group, and say, here we are together at the table of the Lord. That's why that song says there's always a place at the table. There's a feast that's waiting, and it's all your own. Your place is set each time the family gathers. It will never be the same until you are back home. Amen.